Ah, è questo. Ok, ok. Ok, we can start. Welcome to the second evening of the Miaw lecture. We have this night the presentations of Professors Angelo Bucci and Yury Grigoryan. I'll say just a few words to present Angelo Bucci, then Professor De Magistris will introduce Yury Grigoryan. Angelo Bucci from Sao Paulo, Brazil, is one of the more important architects of the Brazilian scene, the Brazilian modern architecture. He is a follower, but also an innovator in the line of Paulo Mendes da Rocha, of Lina Bobardi, or Villanova Artigas, of the great architects that in Brazil in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, did beautiful buildings. And also he works in a city like Sao Paulo, a city very complicated, a huge city, a huge metropolis with great resources, great problems, great contradictions. And he also works in a place, in a countryside where nature is very important. Nature is very virgin, is very strong. So he worked in isolated villas in the countryside, in public buildings in the center of the city. He also did, for example, a very interesting proposal for the Ibirapuera Park in the center of Sao Paulo, working together and in parallel with existing works of Oscar Niemeyer, of Lina Bobardi, of Roberto Burle Marx too. So I think that Angelo Bucci can really give us a new point of view in reference with the problem of the construction, but also in reference with the problem of the thinking, the new metropolitan conditions and the idea of the new city. Thank you. I give just a few words for Yury.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. And just to spend 2 words for introducing architect and Professor Yury Grigoryan, who is in the present actual scene of Moscow, one of the most outstanding figure of the architectural panorama. It's, I say, just a very, very important and essential part of this energizing world, which is Moscow today. Moscow after all the changes, historical changes occurred from the late 80s, a city in which a new generation of architects various generations of architects are nowadays operating, and they witness this the importance of the architecture and the tradition and the relationship between tradition and new horizon of architecture in the present situation. Grigoryan was graduated from the Marquis, the former Kutemas, and at the end of 90s was among the founders, the creators of this bureau, very important, essential part of this of the Russian present scene, Projekt Meganom. Just the term is very mysterious. Maybe in his conference he explained the key of these terms, who has Greek sources, maybe Meganom, great, very great dimension, and nomos, I don't know, but from the end of the 20s, the end of the 20th century, Project Meganom, it's a very important protagonist of the contemporary architectural scene, operating on different scales, from private buildings, residential buildings, to the great dimension of the transformation that characterize the recent development of the city. And recently, Yury Grigoryan and Project Meganom won many very important competition, international competitions. Among others, I remember the competition for the transformation of the former territory of the factory ZIL, one of the biggest factories in Moscow, and in November he won the competition for the Moscow River, which is a very incredible chance for challenge for an architect to intervene in the contemporary Moscow. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Well, hello. Well, thank you, Alessandro, for the invitation. Of course, I feel always as a great privilege to be here. I mean, to be here with my colleagues, architects, to give this opportunity to exchange among us is always very nice. And thank you also for the presentation. Of course, I'm happy to share this lecture with Yury. Very curious about to knowing your projects. And what I brought 3 projects to show you. And as a way to start, I would like to start by showing this one. It's a way to tell a little bit where I came from. And so this is São Paulo City. Is where I went by the first time to start the architecture school, and is the place where I live and work. And I'd like to add, this is a city from which I learned a lot. I learn and I keep learning a lot. So I consider, in my experience, a great privilege to live in the city. So this is this picture is showing Ibirapuera Park. Is a park, important park in the city that was designed by Oscar Niemeyer and Burle Marx. So the landscape designer Roberto Burle Marx and the architect Oscar Niemeyer. This park was inaugurated in '54 to celebrate the 400 years anniversary of São Paulo City. And it's a part with a program. So there are some buildings inside and a program. So what I'm going to show you is not exactly a project, but in November of 2013, we had an exhibition, an art exhibition in this museum, and the curator she invite, besides of course the artists, she invite like a small group of architects, I think that 6 of us, to answer a question that, or to mention something about this question. No? And the question was if the Ibirapuera Park, that there is a museum inside. This museum is the Modern Art Museum of São Paulo. It's a museum that was found pretty much at the same time of this park, a little bit before, but if we think that the park was a project that started some years before the inauguration, so both things came more or less at the same time to the city. And the museum was found in downtown in São Paulo, where it stayed for about 10 years, and then it started to live in a crisis that ended up selling the whole collection to a different museum. So it's a very Brazilian stuff. The Modern Art Museum donate or sold the collection to a Contemporary Art Museum. So nowadays, the Contemporary Art Museum in São Paulo owns the most important modern art collection, and the museum came up again in the 60s, and it is the museum who has the important contemporary art collection. So, but the museum is nowadays placed underneath this roof at this position, more or less, in a temporary pavilion that was built by Lina Bobardi inside this canopy designed by Niemeyer to host an exhibition, if I'm not wrong, in '59. And it was an exhibition about Bahia, called Bahia. But when the exhibition was finished, the construction remains, and it was used for a couple of years as storage for the Brazilian Biennale. And this building played an important role when the Modern Art Museum came up again in '60s and something. So because it hosts the first exhibition called Panorama, and Panorama was the exhibition that happened at the time when we were invited to comment about if this museum should or not stay inside the park. So, and for us it was, it's not a project to be built, it's just to comment some stuff and to present you a little bit of my town. So, but this is a museum, I would say, with architects, they know by heart all so this is a building where it used to host the Biennale of São Paulo. It's 250 meters long and 50 meters wide. This is 150 meters long build by 35. This is exactly the same. This is an exhibition space with a diameter of 70 meters. The distance in between here and there is 750. So to give you an idea, so, and it is pretty free. It seems pretty free, but is something that is very peculiar in Niemeyer work. No, he talked about the curve a lot. And to me, really, the most important construction and invention by Niemeyer in this project is this canopy, the slab that shade a huge part of the park, and in a way, with link different buildings. That is this piece in here. But actually, there is a geometry, very rigorous, that guide the position of this building. And this is what I thought that could be very interesting. You know, if I think about the distance between here and there, 750 meters. So, or if sorry about mentioning a lot of numbers, but in this case, I think that's important. So the area inside this building is 35,000 square meters. So, and what we thought is this. So if I isolate the buildings inside that park, is more or less this figure is showed in here. And if I imagine a perfect square with 750 meters in each side, it would embrace the whole thing. So and this square nowadays would be inside and outside of the park at the same time. So this is nice to answer the question that was made, if the museum should be inside or outside. So, but the total length of this figure is 3 kilometers. So if I imagine that there is a kind of corridoi Vasariani, for instance, to place some artworks. And if I imagine as an arcade with 10 meters wide, 10 meters high, it would have an area that is 30,000 square meters. So that is a little bit less than the building where we have the Biennale nowadays. So, and that was the way that we start to talk about this possibility. So it's just some collages. The picture of Ibirapuera Park, for instance, this street here, the airport is to that side. And everyone that comes from Rio de Janeiro, for instance, they arrive in the city through this road, so it means 100,000 people every day that would cross underneath the museum twice. So we could choose where you are going to displace the piece. So I could show to all the people driving a car underneath this piece of the museum a chosen piece of art. The section that we imagined to build this, of course, it was not a real project, but I think that there is no way to think if not in a real way, you know. We thought that 4 bars, 750 meters each, but how we are going to build? By building 10 columns in each, so the distance in between columns, the span would be 75 meters, and which is a distance very convenient to an egress staircase. So it's the perfect measure to display the egress staircase. So each one of the columns would have a staircase inside. The span would be faced by a truss made in steel in such a way that we had like 4 construction sites if I take each one as 1 bar, or if I take each bar as 10 columns, I could have simultaneously 40 construction sites, because each column could be 1. I could make the truss in the whole country and then bring this. So this is a building that could be built very quickly. And it's nice because when we start to display the columns, and of course the way that we choose the span and everything was to make it in a way that each road, each tree could be preserved in this process. This is the model that we showed at the exhibition, and some collages as well. Ah, sì, grazie. And some images. All these images, the collage, were made by Ciro Miguel, a great architect that worked with me for 10 years. Now he's living in Zurich. And well, but what was very attractive is how a project could give us the opportunity to talk about others, no? Or it was also attractive, the idea to imagine a project that could be very simple as this, as construction, as an idea, but at the same time in a museum that could not exist in any other part of the world. I mean, how to have, could be special, a museum which has in his permanent collection the buildings by Oscar Niemeyer and the gardens by Burle Marx. So this kind of stuff for us was very attractive to think about. So if the bar would cross a place with a lot of trees, we could just suppress part of the ground and to make it as a kind of veranda, an outside piece of the museum, but always elevated. Of course, we thought that when we are inside the park, the ground floor would be, in a way, transparent. So the people walking in the park, running in the park, they would be able to see some of the museum inside. So 3 kilometers, 10 meters high, we thought about to have like a small train going elevated that could cross the whole thing in 10 minutes, but also could stop in front of some of the art piece and to have like a exhibition, very special one, let's say. So, and one more thing that sounds for us very attractive was the possibility of have this, it's a piece of architecture, it's a building, a museum, but with perception, I thought it was much closer to the idea of a city than a building, no? Because it's a kind of building that could never be taken as a whole in one single glance. You have to walk, you have to drive, you have to realize that this is a whole thing. So the form is it's a square, a perfect square, but it's not possible to realize that very easily when you look from just one single piece. So the way that we were going to build the perception of the whole was very attractive to me. So I said 3 projects. This is just like to start by showing a little bit where I'm from, but and this second one is to share with you an experience, to build something very close to here, not in Italy, but Ticino. That is that place where you brought the stones to the Duomo, for instance. But in 2008, we start to design a project. Here, it's a small apartment building in Lugano. Actually, the place is here, which is very close to the Monte Bre, actually at the bottom of the Monte Bre. It's a historical street placed exactly at the bottom of the Monte Bre. It's called Via Pico. And one feature of the site was that it was a spot which has 2 different streets, so we could cross through. And we tried and we did know the ground level pretty much as a free level, in a way that we could cross from one street to other. This is a very often path, and it became a path that is used by the community. And in the ground level, which is showed in this image, we just have one small office, is a structural engineer office that belongs to the same people who invite me to design this project. And this is the plan of one of the apartments. So in this plan is showed the small apartments where we have one floor divided in two small apartments. And here the exactly the same slab, but with one single apartment that has like two cores. So in this side is we have 3 rooms that is more the space to the children, and then here one more bedroom. So it's a house that has its meeting point here in the middle. Just one thing that I'd like to highlight in this image is that you see here the bathroom is showed by one single line. Is because we actually built like that. No, the bathroom was made by just one panel of glass. So this wall is 1 centimeter thick. So the material are always okay. The rooftop is a common garden, and okay. Well, I brought this model just to say it was made by Francisco Triviño, a model maker from Spain, living in São Paulo almost his whole life. And to me, it's very special because this guy is now 91 years old. So he gave this model was produced like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. He's still working. He had just finished a model for us last month, and it's unbelievable. I really love to work with him. He's the same model maker who produced the most attractive models for Brasilia competition, for instance, the Rino Leve project. And okay, so this is just to mention Francisco Triviño and the building that we did. Is so well, of course that as a Brazilian to work in Switzerland, in the beginning I was very worried about all the restriction, the rules, the laws, the all the norms we had to follow to build the building. But well, we were able to do that. But what I would like to mention is, and of course that my peers in Brazil, they also, but it's not so hard to deal with all those rules that we have to build in Switzerland. And in a way it is, but in other way is much clearer. So, and then to me it's very funny when I show this project in Brazil. I like to say that here we were able to do everything that we are not allowed to do in Brazil. And there are a lot of features in this building that are not allowed in Brazil. So it's in, for instance, so I could never do a wall in this high, like 6 stories in wood. This is not allowed. I could never do the egress staircase outside. I couldn't do the common rooftop. I mean, as a garden to everyone. It's not allowed in Brazil to have the glass from the whole height, from the floor to the ceiling. So a lot of stuffs that are not allowed. But maybe, and I couldn't do this open ground level as well. It's not because all the previous one is because it's not allowed by the rules. But the first one, maybe to the social issue that no, it's a point. And it's very curious because we were taken, at least by our colleagues, architects in Switzerland, as from a place which developed a lot of this idea of pilotis in a peculiar way. I think that due to the climatic condition. And but what is true? No, I showed you the Niemeyer work, the canopy of Ibirapuera Park. That it's something that is remarkable. But although on one hand we develop a little bit this language, we are not so much allowed to use due to other kind of problems. No, and here in Switzerland, we had a context that allowed us to apply some of these ideas, no, like we did in here. So this is what I think that is the most special about the possibility of exchange in between our different contexts. No, is because in some situation it makes possible what wouldn't be in one or other side, but just became possible because we are working together. Of course, I had some people, Bazerga and Mosette were the architect from Locarno working with us in it. Andrea Pedrazzini, the structural engineer, and all the people very helpful. But this was the building that we built. In general, we use the same, well, I like very much this picture because it reminds a lot Rio de Janeiro, Sugarloaf, and this kind of, it seems like a Brazilian landscape. But we designed this building by using pretty much the same, even the same materials. No, all the walls in MDF is very, all the floors in terrazzo that it's something that I like too much. We could design some furniture like this. Again, the Ibirapuera here is the same park that I showed you in the beginning. Like this table or some. Here you can see what I mentioned about the bathroom that are made by one single piece of glass. So this is one of the apartments that we design almost everything. And so, and finally, a very small project placed in São Paulo City that is just like the most important thing in the program of this project is a swimming pool. And this is a private swimming pool, but I feel this project as a very linked to the city and very public in a way as in the way that it works. No, but of course it's a private property and a private pool. And to me this was very special as an experience because it was a project very close to my office. I took very long to be able to build something in São Paulo, so this was not the first one, but as close as this, no, because excuse me the parentheses, but I mean, I was born in a very small town, 4 kilometers far away from São Paulo. I went there by the first time to start the architecture school. And when I finished the school, the first stuffs that I had to design were in my town. Of course, my old friends invite me to do very small project, not important at all. But I had a lot of time. I could, but I was working in São Paulo. I could not go to the construction site as often as I wish. So I think that since the beginning, I learned a lot about to define the construction, the procedures far away from the construction site. So I was familiar about to send the drawings directly to the workers to develop some. In that time, no, we had no computer in our office. We work with the regular Miaw, those kind of drawings that we do by hand. And so I think this was very helpful, for instance, when I was designing this project in Lugano or some other experience. But at the same time, when I had this project to be built so close to my office, I mean, this is like 10 minutes walking, I was enjoying a lot the possibility to go to the site every day during the lunchtime. So, of course, in the end of the process, I wish it could be far away, no, because it was very time-consuming and very much. But this is the site, or the site is placed in this neighborhood, exactly in here. So you can see it's surrounded by high-rise building, but in the neighborhood what we built, there is no any one skyscraper. And of course, this is because it's not allowed by the law. There are some laws in Brazil. No? It's a fun thing, but it is true. If I show some project, there's always that, like if we were able to do anything, so a lot of freedom. And what sometimes seems as freedom, it's also could be like precarious, just precarious. So, and if you show, if I show some projects in this context, but in Brazil, everything, you can do anything you want, so it's easy. And when a Brazilian see a project in Switzerland, but all that money is very easy to do what you want. So we always escape of the real problem. I think it's a tendency, it's natural, no? And here, so no one is skyscraper in this neighborhood. They bought the site to build a swimming pool. This site belongs to a couple. They are like what's the no, not so young. Let's say like that. And they are very tired about to travel, to leave São Paulo, because it's crazy. You spend the whole week jumping the traffic, and during the weekend you decide to go to the beach, and the whole city, 20 million people, they have the same idea at the same time. Is amazing, and you are going to be at the traffic again on the road. So they would like to have a place to stay in São Paulo. They bought this site, is 10 meters wide, 25 meters deep, long, to build a pool and a bedroom, almost that, to stay. And they came and they brought this drawing. So she worked as a fashion consultant. She's familiar with drawings, and he is a professor of philosophy at the University of São Paulo. So it's really nice to talk to them. And they had a very clear idea about what to build. So it's a swimming pool, to exercise, to swim. Here would be their bedroom, and they thought they would need a place for a housekeeper, and okay, a place to park in the cars, the garden, and that's it. But they were worried because they used to go to the site and they placed the pool according to their drawing on the ground, and they realized, well, we have no skyscraper, but the maximum height allowed is 6 meters. What means with no setbacks. There is no setbacks required, but you can reach up to 6 meters. So, and the length of the site is south-north. So you have this neighbor shading the side the whole morning, and if they place the pool at this side, they were worried about the sun, and they change to the other, so the whole afternoon. So, and they brought the drawing, they brought also this question, Angelo, do you know, what do you think we should displace the pool to each side, this one, that one? And I said, no, that is, what's the decision to have sun more in the morning or more in the afternoon? But of course, that the period of sun they would have at the ground level would be the same. No way to escape. But I said, but I think it's a very good idea to displace the pool, but not to one side or other. Let's displace it up. And they asked, but how much? I said, 6 meters. And they, why? Because that is the surface. If you are looking to the sunlight, the surface is defined by law, again, 6 meters above the ground level. Because so we always think about surface as the place where we are walking, you know, but it depends what we are talking about. If I talk about water table, for instance, at this place, the water table is 2 meters below, 2.5 meters below the ground level. If I think about the airplanes, at this place, they are 800 meters above. So, and this is the position that we suggest to the pool. And this is the project that we designed, more or less. And when we look, so here, the airplanes, I like that, but let's just do. So if I show you the drawing that we did, it's pretty close to that one that they brought. And sometimes I like to think that, no, that our goal is not just to, or it's not to have ideas. I don't think that architecture is first about having crazy ideas or amazing ideas. It's, to me, is to know how to build stuffs. So they had the idea, they had a very clear idea how, what they would like to have, but they didn't know exactly how to build. And then we made this proposal. So if you look at the plans, this is the ground level. The landscape designer, he is very happy because he told me he had twice the area of the site to put garden. So because the walls, the 6 meters wall are also gardens. So while in general we have to find the maximum FAR in a site, here we were trying to find the opposite, was the maximum area of garden possible. And as we had the pool on the top, and of course all the mechanical space on the bottom, all the pumps on the bottom, to make the water recirculated, we built some other small pools, like to make the water in the garden mixed in this. So we have a small one here that drop the water to that lower one in here, and the main pool When we make it circulate, the water drop fall down to this way and that way to the other pools, and the whole system works as one single pool, displayed also vertically, as the garden also works. So it is like this. The water pour at this point and that point to here and here to here, and through the staircase to this point. And from this place where we have the pumps, it recirculates up. Of course, there are a lot of choice. You can make just one. If the water is being heated, we suppress the falling. But some models, or one model, 2 pictures of one model, and the pool. So it is a project made by some pieces. It's hard to define what is exactly inside or outside, what one thing starts or finished. I like to think that it's not so. One thing that it's very nice to me is the fact that each level has a different mood. When you get inside the site in the ground level, of course you are inside this 10 meters high, 25 meters long place defined by 6 meter high walls. But when you get the rooftop where the main pool is placed, your limits change completely. And so, of course, that in Brazil we never heard about thermal bridges. It does not exist in Brazil. And it makes sense to me because as we don't have below zero, there is no condensation, there is no freezing, and so it changed everything. You can discuss if it's more or less comfortable, but it's not a mandatory issue, like in here. And this, of course, although this is a place, it's very small as construction, and there are some things that I really like. For instance, their apartment is 30 square meters, and the housekeeper apartment is 30 square meters. So this in the social feature in Brazil is not so common. It's maybe the only construction in the whole street that you can look through from the street. And we have a lot of gardens underneath the pool and the apartments, and the deck on the top, the sun deck on the top. But of course, we have this kind of it's a tropical climate, and a lot of trees that can grows partially shaded. But we also thought about these two main pieces as a kind of giant pergola or something like that, and they are in a position which is very convenient to do that. For if you realize the wall, this wall side of the pool is inclined, and it's inclined to allow the sun come down to light the garden. So in a way that the whole ground level is hit by the sun in some point of the day, and that's of course is the reason why we designed this staircase in this way, very transparent, like this. And here you see the airplane. Can you see the airplane here? That's I really like that because I think it highlights the metropolitan condition of the site. Although it looks like an oasis in a way, you go there just to spend time, but it is very linked to metropolitan dimension of the city. And this is the approaching of the airplane to the local airport. So it about each 5 minutes an airplane arriving from Rio and exactly on this route. And here I hope you can imagine what I said, that when you reach the top level, the place is it's different. It's a different landscape. The boundaries disappear, or those first boundaries disappear, and you can here see the skyscraper and those stuffs. No. The structural engineer that we work in this project, of course, is an amazing person and a very skilled engineer. And we could do stuff. The swimming pool is counterweight to the other part, the apartments. And so here you can see that we could even detach totally the column and the beam in this, and that's why we made this kind of, to highlight it in the glass, no, to keep it. That's it. Thanks a lot.
The right one.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's so interesting that I'll show no one built building this time and huge scale projects. This is, I think it's a good contrast for today. This is our architectural bureau in Moscow, founded almost 15 or maybe 17 years ago. And my idea is to show how student research helping us, and our teaching helping us to find, I wouldn't say new ideas, but important ideas. And for me, the good example is Venturi and Brown learning from Las Vegas when they decided to do the research. Introducing the stripe to the world, Las Vegas, and it changed completely the architecture later. It was just the student work originally from the beginning. In 2011, it's a coincidence from one side, from another side not, because it helps us now to be selected even for international competitions. We did for the diploma work this Moscow inventory research when we were researching the old Moscow, because the old Moscow in reality is the hole in the middle. And the idea was to cut the old Moscow and to see like the structure of the city, and we did an inventory of these quarters. And the biggest one is 300 hectares, the biggest one. The smallest one, you can see, is the size of Barcelona and Madrid and Milan. The smallest one. The biggest one is 300 hectares. This is the structure. It's not a quartal, of course, it's the microrayon. Then we did that structure with the density of roads, and we have in that old city 28% and 14% and 6% on the periphery. And first we were the first that counted that, and then it starts to be clear for Moscow Transportation Department that something goes wrong with the transportation, because traffic is evident, but the reason is that the density of roads. Also, we did a little of calculation of what is the center in the gardening. This center is only 5% of the territory, even less. And it's not historical city anymore, because they built, there was 10,000 buildings in the center before the revolution. Now we have these old buildings, only 5,000, the half. During the Soviet era, 1,000 building built in the center, and during last 12 years or 20 years, which is the like post-Soviet period, also 1,000. And it means that, and you can see the difference in the structure, because in the middle you can see the Stalinist structure. They created like streets and spaces and gardening, and you can see no structure in the post-Soviet. It's it's like a dotted. And then we understand that the only value we have is the structure of the streets, and the idea is to do the souvenir from that and to sell this. Also, we did an inventory of abandoned territories, and this is also interesting because we have numerous of abandoned territories in Moscow, and Moscow is still sprawling. It's a huge agglomeration. And then we decided to finally, that the most interesting thing is the periphery of Moscow. We finished that research with the idea of cutting not the gardening, cutting the third ring. This is the size of the periphery in Paris. Exactly the same. It's the old city, Stalinist city. We cut everything which is structured and leave everything which looks not so well structured, microrayons, abandoned things, a lot of nature. And later, having this idea of cutting the center, we apply for the competition for the research for Moscow Urban Forum 2013 with the title Archaeology of the Periphery. And this inventory helps us to be chosen as, to be paid even. And we had almost 4.5 months to do the work. And the work was to research the periphery, and I'll show you shortly what is the outcome from that. First, we choose 35 cities around the world and did the index, like FAR, floor area ratio. We did periphery area ratio index. It's simple. There is a center, and we had agents in all of those cities, and they send us articles, all of them, and they help us to check our data, because usually you cannot research something. I don't know how to research São Paulo, but we had a couple of agents there, and one of them write text. Others were helping, students were helping to collect the data. Then we understand that America is the leader, of course, because Los Angeles, the periphery area ratio is 9 or almost 10,000. Seoul is 4. There is no periphery in Seoul. Then we did this comparison of Moscow. Of course, it's about urbanization, and this area grows during the 20th century, and we can see that the population. I'm sorry that everything is not maybe well seen. But you can, if someone is interested, you can download this from the site of Moscow Urban Forum. It's open. It's not like a property. Moscow is somewhere between Lagos and Cairo in terms of population growth, but it's still on. And the general tendency is that 2 billion people will be living in slums, maybe most in the peripheries. And maybe there is a time to shift from planned cities to spontaneous cities, because we cannot control these megapolises. And the idea was just to understand what's wrong with these peripheries. It's about riots in Paris. We have a lot of different peripheries in the world. We have also inventory in that research. Sometimes it looks nice. And if we are talking about the centers, this is Tokyo, and of course, we can say that now there is a cult of the center, because everybody dreaming about these qualities of the centers, but people, as an example, in Moscow, living on the periphery. 90% of people living on the periphery, no one living in the center. But all of the values are about streets, pedestrianization, and we have 10 more pedestrian streets now in the center of Moscow. And all of the investments counted are like $5 billion a year for this pedestrianization in Moscow. Nothing on the periphery. This is Moscow. This is like a Moscow periphery. You can see even small buildings there and microrayons. And this is the typical periphery of Moscow. And this is the research. This is the methodology. We did there's like a multidisciplinary research. The title is Spaced. Sociology, politics, architecture, culture, economics, and data. It was before it was space, but when we win that competition, they add this D to us, because another guy was, Alexei Novikov, was very experienced in this researching of real-time data. Here you can see the difference in these peripheries. And this is interesting. If you can compare the population density and public transport accessibility, you can see that only few of the cities like Paris are working well. Others completely not. And if we are talking about Moscow, we did this with mobility in chain. My friend Federico Paralotta, who based here, and honestly I forgot to invite him for this lecture, but I need to mention that it's their job. This is the population density on the outskirts. This is the accessibility of public transport. And this is the result of the program until 2030, improving the public transport. And you can see that almost there are no changes for the periphery. There are, of course, but not a lot of. And here you can see the difference. And we did the poll. And some of the people inside the MKAD, which is the bigger ring in Moscow, they even doesn't feel like Muscovites. They feel that they are living somewhere. And we have southeast as the most problematic area. And here you can see what is, here is the Kremlin and the outskirts of Moscow. And here you can see that donut, the fourth one, the biggest one, that was researched by us, and we named this as Old Moscow. There is no river, there is no sea. Moscow sprawling everywhere. It's like an oil spot. We did an inventory of all of the waves of construction on that periphery. For Moscow, for some cities, there are sources with that data. For Moscow, it was the first time we did this, and you can see that most of the periphery was built in 70s and also 90s, which it was a surprise for me. Then we did inventory of all of the residential and typologies, and now we know where they are. This is important quote. You can read this in English. It was the quote of Nina Krajnia, one of the authors of Microrayon. And it was clear that for them it wasn't, it was the really new aesthetics. It wasn't like a work as engineer. It was a new aesthetics. And these equal comfortable houses was the idea of urban planning and construction. Equality was the main idea of that area, and it's still there. You can see that. Also accessibility. We did this research with students, and they check all of the accessible territories. We have different levels of accessibility. The darkest is most accessible. And we can say in the daytime, 73% of the territory is accessible. It's like a park already. Also, we find old features from urban planning existing in the city, and this is also a resource for highlighting that. And sometimes you can see old parks or old roads in the microrayons. Also, we find spontaneous centers. It was a quite complicated technology, and then we understand that new centers emerge in the periphery, and this research is about services. And we find that southeast of Moscow, this spot, as an example, on the southeast, is as dense as the center, but nobody knows why. Because it's like a surface, it's like a flat surface. Also, we find that nobody is visiting the center, and 20% never visiting the center at all in Moscow. It was also interesting data. Also, they did this research on data, and then understand that 40% of these transits through the center, but before they think that more than 40. It's only 40. This also was surprising, and finally we decided not to do any project because it was only 4 months of work. We decided to introduce the concept of super park, which is the idea is to leave everything like it is, not to touch this, because the idea is now to change microrayons for quartals. Nobody can do this in years, of course, and we need to find a new strategy for that. And this is an example, like public transport. Maybe it's evident, but not so well understood in Russia now, that you can leave buildings like they are, and maybe to work only with society, only with landscape, improving existing landscape. And finally, we did 2 books in Russian and in English. They are quite thick, and sorry. And also, it was a challenge for us. Also, we did a big exhibition, and this propaganda works very well, I would say. Right propaganda, helping you to sell your ideas to the city, and you can see that research. You can download this if you're interested. You can find articles about your cities there. The second example is another diploma work, 2003. We introduced the Green River concept for Moscow. This idea was to connect 2 huge forests, one on the north, another on the south, through industrial territories to be renovated. To do the little of corridor, green corridor, 20 kilometers of pedestrian corridor, and this is the composition. And here you can see 2 rivers. One is the Blue River, Another is Green River, and the cross of these two rivers accidentally is the Zil, which we also win because of that concept. It helps us to win the competition, that we show that it's the cross of the new center. Maybe it was the speculation, but now we're doing the project. And this is that river. You can see that it's like a little bit of green everywhere, more green in the industrial. And this was the scheme for the Zil, the red dot on the southeast. The biggest one is the cross of these two rivers. And with that luggage, with that portfolio, we apply for the international competition for Moscow River last summer. And we worked together with Gillespie's, our friends, from landscape architects from Scotland, Systematica from Milano, and other companies. And we were chosen in 6, and we delivered that concept, Moscow Future Ports, where city meets the river. The idea was that we take the picture broader after the big Moscow competition. We decided that it's important to see the Moscow River in the context of the river network. Then there was a concept of river link parks, because all of those areas are protected anyway, and but in the same time times abundant. Then this is the built substance of Moscow agglomeration. And here you can see the sports in Moscow, because the river is huge, of course, and you cannot do this even in 50 years, I think, in 30 years. And it was important to find really important points of intervention, and here they are. And what is the port for us? Port is exactly the place where city meets the river. It's the public space, of course. And we changed this for the Moscow landscape to make it clear for Moscow authorities. Sorry that some of those things are in Russian, they are doubled. Usually it is the park, or maybe sometimes connection is the boulevard. And finally, port is the destination on the river. Here is a quite complicated scheme. What is the port? Is the walking, connecting, parking, and arriving. Now it's we are developing this after the winning competition. We're developing the project together with the city, and we have such a places in Moscow where city meets the river. It's the Strelka Terrace. The bar, Strelka bar, it's one of the nicest places in Moscow. Of course, it is in the center, but for the periphery, we have no such points. Also, we did another study for the accessibility, and also it's clear that Moscow River is completely non-accessible. It's even unseen in the city. You never can get there. With Systematica, we did the studies of public transport and bicycle. This is the new scheme. And finally, this is the small result of this is the concept. We have 11 city-scale ports, 28 district-scale ports for microrayons, and small decks, like numerous of decks along the river. This is the scheme areas adjacent to that, and this is what we are doing now. Each of the ports are having a different structure from the same components. Black is the new development. It's not our idea; it's already happened. Gray is the old development, and red is the port itself, and of course, green is the green. Pictures, and what's also important to say that, of course, we divided the center and periphery, introducing two structures. First is greening the center, and the second, activating the periphery. Activating the periphery is about ports. Greening the center, no ports, only green islands in the granite channel. Here is the scheme for the river. Also, what's important to mention that we find 120 sources of water pollution, and we introduced it to the city. And this is a super important part, because the idea was to make the river clean, accessible, and active. First was clean, because river is unclean there, and this was the essential part. Here, major ports. The first is the Silver Lake. This is a protected area, and not a lot of interventions here. The second is Parliament Gardens, because they decided to move the parliament from the center to this peninsula. And here you can see the place for the new parliament complex. And we decided that it will be sort of new, one of the new centers, and huge public space needed on the river. The master plan. And we did a sketch for the parliament also, which is funny, but we want to make it transparent, because the existing concept is to make a castle from white marble. If you've been in Moscow, you can see such Soviet-style castles. We decided at least to make it something different. And then Moscow city is lacking parking, and the idea was to do the underground parking and cover this with orange and green public space, because it's a really gray thing. And Zeal Planet is what we are doing now, 3 channels: culture, innovation, and leisure. And this is what's on. And finally, the most abandoned place in Moscow. You can see that it's completely non-accessible. You cannot get there. There is an oil factory there, and the worst ecology and the cheapest flats there. Anyway, it's very close to one of the new spontaneous centers. And we decided to make there also public space, and city now is working on that project, because it's a sort of equality also to deliver something to the poorest area. And the last thing I want to show you is about greening the channel. It's quite simple. It's the architecture from green. It's the idea of our partner Brian Evans from Gillespie's. This is how it works. It's simple, and these islands are floating and cleaning the water in the channel everywhere. Kremlin developments. This is the center. Of course, we want to connect these islands with Zaryadye Park and to create this pedestrian route, and to maybe to do the wetland from the channel, because we're also having channel in Moscow. It's this one. It's not abandoned, but it's not for ships, and it's possible to do there the public space in the channel. And also, this is like a sort of dream what the river is, because it's not about using the river as a source for development or for selling, I don't know, expensive flats, views, or whatever. It's not about exploitation. It's about the river itself. That's why we think that these islands in front of the Kremlin, and also Wi-Fi and fish in the water, is the future of Moscow. It's maybe a little bit, I don't know, utopian. It looks like utopian, but now everybody discussing these islands. I think that this discussion is also productive. Thank you very much.
can open. It's time for discussion. Have you got any question? I think our guests are ready to.
Yes, thank you for these two beautiful lectures. Very interesting, very different in scale, but with something common, that is the working on very huge cities, and in very different way, both the architects match this size, this dimension. This is something that I think is important, because of course Milan is not like Moscow or like Sao Paulo, but we live and we work in a very dense region, Lombardy, and often the context, the frame of our thinking is a region of 10 million of inhabitants or 30 million of inhabitants, and I think that this is a very interesting aspect that some of us are practicing or following, but for many architects and many professors, it's not so easy to match this kind of huge scale. Someone wants to make some questions, to make some remarks, to express some opinions. Ilaria, Gennaro, the students, but Antonella, tu che lavori sulla grande scala, vieni.
My point would be about Moscow. I used to work with that scale, with that change of scale. I'm wondering about the image of the public space. So I think that the real challenge is trying also to think about a new kind of space that has to do with that new dimension. And the case of Brazil, it's the Movimento Moderno idea of that huge dimension, that huge stone. In Milan we had the Maseratici in the project of Garibaldi, and now we see the result of that idea. We really have Maseratici in a terra in Braga, as in the project of Pierluigi Nicolini. And I don't know very well if that kind of way to work with stone in Europe really works very well. We have the case of Porta Nuova that is quite problematic, I guess. So my question is, what about the idea of the use of the public space in Moscow? It's really a Piazza San Marco. We have to invent a new typology of space due to the fact that that new scale of the city constrains us to work with a new form of the city that, as is very clear in your presentation, it's a link between green and gray infrastructure.
Maybe. Please.
Yep.
Yes, of course we used that Piazza San Marco as a sort of provocation for the mayor of the city, because for them it's really difficult to understand what is the port of the future, because they still think they want to change now during our work the port for portal, because then they still feel that the port is very industrial. And our idea is to introduce, as you said, not the new type of public spaces, but for Moscow it will be the new one, because all of the microrayons, they are not connected with water at all. They use the water as a periphery. They are somewhere close to the road, and the water is the nice periphery, but not used at all. And the idea is to put there the platform, or together with developers, maybe even commercial complex, but on the water, for having their parking, a little of retail, restaurant, not huge one. Now we are trying to balance this, because if it's super commercial, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. It could be a quiet place, or as I was trying to show, that all of them are completely different. All of those main ports, 45, they are completely different compositions. Some of them are linear, some of them are multi-nuclear, some of them are compact. And this compact type is the piazza on the water. Of course, sometimes it's like a huge platform, as in the Parliament Center. The idea is to create the retail center there under the piazza, because retail can give you a little bit of money to build the proper public space on top. The answer is that this is the challenge to create such a type of public space. Of course, we are working here as planners, not as architects, and we will program this, and we will deliver this to the city, and after approval, maybe they will do competitions for that, and then we could get this as an image, like architectural image. And architects will, of course, invest their vision and knowledge, and maybe we could see completely different typologies there. This is the answer.
I want to make a question to you about one point that for me is very interesting in your lecture and also in Angelo's lecture. That is the relationship between the different scales and the role of architecture in the remaking the city. That is the topic of this workshop too. I got the impression, maybe it's a mistake, but that you working at that huge scale, you have to use something like a ready-made architecture. You put some buildings in big quantities. Of course, you cannot design each building, you cannot go in the detail, and you have to choose some typologies or some kind of buildings. On the other side, Angelo, for example, in the Ribapuera project, that is very, very strong, stretch architecture to the scale of the planning in a way, making these bars of 750 meters and make, for example, 4 buildings that are exactly the same, or a building in 4 parts that are out of scale parts, also in comparison with the marquise and the big scale of the Ribapuera Park. So what is the limit between architecture and planning or managing of the city? How you use architecture in your planning activity, in imagining the new Moscow?
It's quite simple answer, because we did very small projects even 7 years ago, and our smaller project is 3 per 5 meters. And this is my favorite. It's like a small wooden barn we did, penetrated from inside to outside. And this is what we love to do. One of my teachers said that you are never doing what you want. There is a demand for you, and you are doing what you need to do. And now I feel that I'm not a fan of huge projects, but maybe for Moscow they start doing this, and this self-reflection is so needed now for this post-Soviet era that it's our duty to work on that now. Of course, as we can, we will switch for that amazing architecture of your scale, of course, because this is what we want to do. But now we are working on that. This is, and we are not doing now any architecture in that projects. We have several architectural projects in the bureau, different scale, and this is completely different branch now, because we cannot, even different people are working in the bureau on that sort of projects. Maybe you can say something. No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.